This is episode 58 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by Inspect Point. Today, my guest is Bryan Schultz of Brycer's The Compliance Engine. Been wanting to get Bryan on for quite a while now. I actually flew out to their office in Chicago and got to sit down with them for well over an hour to chat about things. Had a great video feed all set up in their office, and my great AV skills weren't able to capture the video. So great audio though. It was a great chat with Bryan about what he's seeing throughout fire prevention bureaus and AHJs throughout the U.S., what their needs are and what they're asking of Compliance Engine and Brycer, and how the industry can help, right? Inspect Points recently launched their integration Compliance Engine, which provides better data flow down to the HJs and those building owners. So really cool to kind of debut that and kick that off and discuss that. But also the entire stakeholder analysis, the different stakeholders in the process of fire prevention, not just the building owners, not just the service providers and contractors, but the HJs themselves and kind of who interacts in between. Better data flow means that's a win for everybody. So yeah, Bryan gives a story of where they started and kind of how they came to be of where they're at now. So really cool. Hey, just a quick plug. If anybody does listen to this episode and wants to see some more about the integration of Inspect Point's data flow to Compliance Engine, mention this episode, please. We'll shoot you a free iPad. Anyway, on to the podcast. And again, thanks everybody for listening. All right, we're here. Bryan, thanks for finally getting us together. It's been
It's been a long time.
I think I was just telling Matt out there, I was like, well, I saw you guys. I thought you were there at the moment, but we were at the NFSA ITM Summit in Chicago,
Yeah.
which it was, I think we'd started Inspect Point for a few years, but it was like the first, like I was just full time at that point, and it was quite the event. Little, contractors versus what's going on in the city of Chicago. It's totally changed now, right? It's a lot better sentiment, and I think it's been good. So Bryan, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
I have to say though, when we talked about doing this, we were going to be in Florida in warm weather on a golf course, and we're in Chicago right
Or in Chicago in January. Yeah,
So-
I know. Yeah, not my bad. Hey, we can still do that. We just don't have to record, right?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been a little bit. I know we have some good stuff to obviously, or we've announced it at this point,
Sure.
but wanted to give the audience, I forgot what episode this is going to be, but really explain Compliance Engine, Brycer, where you guys got going, and it's mainly in the US, but there's other areas in the world. Obviously, we were just talking about that, where there's potential for
Sure.
compliance software and how that works. So I guess give the background of Brycer and
Sure.
why you're in this mess that you are now.
It's interesting because so I grew up on in the contractor side of the business.
Yeah.
And a little bit, I'll preface that with my grandfather and my uncle were both on the fire departments.
Oh, wow.
Various fire departments in Illinois, Bellwood, Westchester, and Lombard. And so growing up, I had, fire department blood in my family, but my father went a different path. He wanted to be a business owner. So he had various businesses from hot dog stands to real estate and some
Oh, wow.
ones. But the one that clicked was the Fire Protection Service Company,
Yeah.
which has since been sold. But so growing up, I do jobs in the warehouse, would recharge fire extinguishers,
Oh, man.
6 years, and basically sweep the floor and do all that.
Yeah.
But then as I got older, I was a fire extinguisher technician.
Yeah.
I went out there and would walk around buildings. And to me, that was one of the coolest jobs I ever had. Because I got to go into every business.
Sure.
And go walk through the whole building.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was amazing. You know, I go to a paper mill one day or a train brake manufacturer.
Right.
And you get to see the inner workings of all these businesses and you go into every room.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Extinguishers. Was there any like,
Surprisingly, they let you go all over the place
yeah,
too, with
yeah,
sometimes very minimal security.
yeah,
And I always,
right.
I think back to that now and I'm like, I guess if you wanted to get into a business, go do
Yeah,
fire
right,
extinguisher.
exactly.
Maybe it's changed. It's been, 20 plus years since I've been on a truck, but so that's how I got into the business, was a family business, like most people in our
Yeah.
industry. But then I gravitated towards sales.
Yeah,
So I would go knock on doors and back then we were small and my job was to go out and bring in new customers and we
Sure.
were primarily inspect and test and service, very little install work. And I would go out old school way, with paper maps, MapQuest and the books,
Yeah.
that had all the
yeah.
the
I'd get
maps.
everywhere.
And some of your audience may have never seen one of these.
Right.
But you'd kind of highlight the streets that you covered and I would go door to door and hope that they would choose us for their service company.
Sure.
And I was naive at the time, but what I learned is I would go into businesses and they would say, sure, let's go look at the sprinkler room. And I could see a report hanging on the riser and on the backflows and on the fire alarm panel.
Yep.
Right? It's all right there. And I would see reports that were, last time it's been inspected would be 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Sometimes it would be when it was installed and it had never been touched.
Sure.
And I would see this all the time. Or the person at the building, the engineer would say, we haven't seen the fire department in years, and it just fell to the wayside.
Yeah.
And this would happen, at various cities and it happened. And I was at night with him. I thought growing up that everybody had their tests done. It was just, I wanted them to use my company versus somebody else's, but that everybody was doing it because the fire department was making you do it.
Right.
Right. Or somebody. And that's really what sparked this business.
Interesting.
Was that, how are all these businesses not?
Were you really in the field and you're like a light bulb went off?
Yeah, it was, well, yes, it was very similar. It was, if the fire department knew about this, then they could act on it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that was the question. I was like, but how do they don't know about this information?
Right.
So what I did is I went and met with a guy named Mike Gilbert, who was vice president of the Illinois Fire Inspectors Association at the time. And he was, our office was in Woodridge and Downers Grove was the city over.
Yeah.
So I asked him to meet me for lunch. And I said to him, and I had basically kind of a napkin thought of how I can get you this data and what would you do with it if I could get it to you?
Sure.
Right? Would you go visit the business? Could you send him a letter saying, hey, you need to get this tested?
Yeah.
And that was the conversation I had with Mike Gilbert at lunchtime. And I think he's since retired. And we're about 30 minutes into this lunch. And he looks at me and he goes, you need to quit your job. That's $1 billion idea. Right. And so that was the motivation.
Oh, wow.
It's like, this might be real.
Wow.
This might be something really cool to do.
That's crazy.
And
what year was this?
This was just about 15 years ago.
Okay.
Right. And now at the time we were a family business and I was kind of running the business and it was one of those where dad's going to pass it on to the son. So that was what I was supposed to do.
Right.
And, and I come to my dad's office and say, hey, I have this idea I might want to go chase down.
Yeah.
And I give him a ton of credit in the world because he never tried to stop me.
Oh, that's great.
Says,
dangle the carrot or
well, what am I going to do? Or I need you here.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, go chase it.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
And so how Matt and I got connected then is, so Matt was from the insurance industry.
Yep.
And had been with the insurance industry for a long time, 15 plus years when we got together. And kind of walked him through this idea and says, hey, here's what I got. And granted, at the time, he had 6 kids at the time. I only had 1 when we started talking. And so we spent about 6 months kind of researching the market and putting all the numbers together and figuring out what we needed to do and who's going to develop it, because neither one of us are developers. Right.
Yeah.
We know what it should do or want to do.
Right.
But I can't tell a computer how to do it.
Yeah.
So we needed smart people to do that. And we spent about 6 months on that, put a business plan, and we got some family office money. And we both said we're going to give it a shot.
Wow.
And
So did you go all in at once or were you kind of double dipping?
Once we committed, we were all in.
Wow.
We quit our full-time jobs and we were 100% dedicated.
Oh, man.
50% dedicated, as you
Man.
know, to start a business.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, he had 3 more kids, I had 4 more, so at some point it became to this, we don't have any choice.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
you gotta
work.
make it work, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
funny.
But you know, like any business, it didn't just, you know, everything wasn't perfect.
Right.
Um,
Growing pains and
people ask me, they're like, what's one of the things that you just didn't foresee? Right. And I tell people, and this kind of touches on some of the things I think maybe you want to touch on today is one of the assumptions we made in our business plan was that the fire departments would be able to give us the data of what they had. And
Yep.
we weren't gonna create the data or have to find the data. We were just gonna take over the process of the
Yep.
data flow coming in.
Yep.
Right? So somebody tests a fire alarm or a sprinkler system. We would be collecting that data from the contractor.
Mhm.
And then we would be updating the database and then using that data to, you know,
Yep.
let a building know when they're due or past, et cetera.
Right.
But we thought we were gonna start with this solid base.
Yeah.
So Warrenville, Illinois, where we're at right now and where our office is, that was our first customer.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And we says, okay, we're ready to go. We say, can we export your data, you know, in a format that we can digest? And they weren't able
Crickets on the
to,
other
yeah, they're
side.
like, well, we can give you some properties, but they didn't know in their database, there was nothing that could say this building, you know, 123 Main Street has a fire alarm, has a sprinkler system, has hood system. It wasn't there.
Wow.
So we were like, oh, well, now what do we do?
Yeah, right.
And what's interesting about that is 15 years, roughly 15 years past that point, that's how the data still comes from the fire departments. So
That's crazy.
I thought as a contractor, and it's maybe most of your customers,
Yeah.
you know, still don't fully understand that the fire departments just don't have this information.
Yeah.
It's easily.
Then the
usable.
property information. but-
Yeah.
And maybe the occupancy,
Yeah, I mean,
you know? I don't know.
right, so they're flying blind.
Yeah.
So unless they physically go to all these buildings to look for this,
Right.
they couldn't tell you if a fire alarm hasn't been serviced.
Right.
They can't tell you if deficiencies exist on that fire alarm or sprinkler system. They don't have any of that. And it's still like that today. So if somebody's not using the compliance engine, you could walk into any fire department in the country and very few of them, I mean, I'm talking single digits, could provide you with a database that
Sure.
they could use.
Sure. Well,
I had no idea that was, we didn't even consider that. We just assumed they have to have this information.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you're assuming that. Well, going back to being you being a tech
Yeah.
and you going through the building,
Right.
right? You see the paper there.
Mhm.
So that's almost the key of the whole business.
Right.
Like if it's paper, it's not moving anywhere from there. Or there's a lot of trouble to enter that and then go.
Well, that's, and granted, there's still people out there using paper, as you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Back then, more than today.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I was hanging on the riser. There was a report there, you know, a triplicate copy or something that they left at the system. But in the fire department, we're supposed to go walk around and look at this to make sure
Sure.
it was right. That's how the system had been built,
Yep.
right? Code gets into a place, fire department does this, tech goes out, hangs it there so that the insurance company or the building owner or the fire department can then see that it's done.
Right.
And that works if the fire department physically is going to be in all those
Mhm.
places.
Yep.
But where that process broke is that very few fire departments actually can do that,
Right. The staffing and.
right? Just the
Yeah.
staffing just doesn't allow for it.
Sure.
And if we did do that, right, we'll talk about cost. The cost would be dramatic. Would be, you know, to have a physical
Oh, I
person,
understand.
loaded cost of that person, retirement, all that would far exceed, you know, a report submittal cost or something. like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
It would
yeah,
just
yeah.
be, it would be massive.
Right.
So it just doesn't happen,
Yeah.
right? And then something else is just because the report's there doesn't mean the system passed the test,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I can hang a report on a system with a deficiency on it.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that, so what we also found is that firemen will go out, test has been done and not realize that the systems are past due, or I mean, not past due, but deficient.
Right.
You know, and I know some states have a red tag or a green
Yeah,
tag.
yeah,
or
yeah.
something. But then you gotta go back there constantly. So it's a reinspection.
It's a visual, you have to be.
It's a
there.
visual,
Right.
but who's gonna then follow up and say, hey, did these red tags get closed out?
Right.
I mean, from a personal experience now, granted, when I was on the contractor side in my previous role, just assumed it got done.
Yep.
Didn't know how, just that's how it gets done.
Right.
Now we have close to 1,000 fire departments we're partnered with. and,
Wow.
I think
Wow.
it's 6 of the 10 top largest cities in the country
Yep.
are been using the compliance engine. So we have a, very intimate knowledge about what is possible and what is not possible from
Sure.
a fire department staffing perspective in this arena.
Well, especially with those large cities, they have big budgets and if.
But a lot of
if-
buildings
if-
too.
Yeah,
Right.
right. But
So,
at the end of the day, nobody has the staffing, so.
Correct.
And it's probably not getting better.
I don't see that changing. I don't see, what do we got
Oh,
here?
yeah, St. George, Utah, I love it.
Yeah, I don't see that all of a sudden. The fire departments are going to say, how we solve for this. Is just go hire 100 more fire inspectors.
Right.
I just don't see that being
Yeah,
realistic.
well, there's no tax dollars for
Yeah.
that either.
Right, so I think that's, if we as an industry believe. That a fire alarm or a sprinkler system, all these systems need to be working. And in order for us to ensure that they have to be tested and maintained, if that's true. I don't write the codes,
Yeah,
but there's data to back that up that you need to maintain these systems.
yeah,
Then. The only way to do that, in my opinion, is we have to understand the data and we have to be able to use the data and we have to be able to do it efficiently.
right. Yeah, that gets in a whole wormhole of like what's what happened. There's a lot of data
Sure.
out there, right? That everybody has,
Mhm.
but we haven't found I think we're starting to use it, but I don't think that there's. It's frustrating.
It's still in its infancy, but I mean, we can see, I guess how we see it. Even now it started, so, I mean, I know people that are listening have seen us announce an integration between the compliance
Yeah.
engine and spec point. And what that solves for is the time in which the fire department can act on things,
Yes,
right? So, statistically on TCE, it could take, weeks or a month, but by the time the technician does the test,
yep,
gets it into the compliance engine and then essentially into the fire department's hand,
right,
right? Well, with the integrations, we're talking, that can get into the database at the time of inspection,
right,
right? Which means now we could be chopping a month off
yeah,
of time in which things can get acted on. And what a lot of contractors may not think about is the fire department now is able to push that data into their CAD systems or their response. So the fire trucks, as they roll out, are now using that data. If a fire pump issue or there's a fire alarm issue or a sprinkler system
Yeah.
issue, that now can show up in their software that they're using
on site.
in as close to real time as it's ever been in our industry.
Sure,
Right.
sure.
And so we actually have integrations with other softwares that the fire department uses. First Due was the
Yep.
first one we had in that market. And Seattle, for example, was where the first integration was set up between us and them.
Okay,
Is there's an alert tile saying, hey, fire protection system has deficiencies on it, and that is now showing up.
okay.
Real,
So if the fire pump's off, they know not to
yeah,
try to
I mean,
connect to it to get there.
they know right away, so that could save critical time.
Yeah,
Before they show up to the building, they have this information,
sure,
right? Whereas if you think back to the old process, a paper report sitting on that fire pump, that data is essentially useless to somebody responding to that building.
Yeah.
Right. So is it gonna happen tomorrow that all of the data is gonna flow through TCE at the time of service and be in the hands of response teams? No. But it's happening now,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, we already have reports that are going through.
Yep.
As we speak,
right,
right, through our integration.
yeah,
And as more cities adopt our platform, and where contractors adopt your platform and other platforms.
Yep.
That flow is gonna just
It'd be a lot.
change
Yeah.
things dramatically.
Yeah,
Which the goal is that we have compliance. When we say compliance, we're talking about fire protection systems that are reliable and are at work,
yep,
right?
yep.
And I think every day we're getting closer and closer to that.
Yes, yeah, it's also, you know, I forgot to mention, you know, forgot to even, it was not even top of mind of like the first responder
Yeah.
showing up, or that firefighter showing up and the
Right.
team seeing that right
Yep.
right on site,
Right.
Because that is a big value. And again, they have to have the kind of full flow to the opposite side of the integration going out, but
Correct.
Yeah.
You look at it and say, think of a technician at that panel is now talking to somebody responding. to
yeah,
building,
that firefighter, right?
right?
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Now they're using the integration for other reasons too. So, currently, if a fire inspector walks into a building and isn't using the compliance engine, they have to physically walk in and ask for this documentation.
Sure.
Now, a lot of people, if you're doing it on a handheld, you're not leaving a paper copy anymore sitting at
No.
that panel or on the riser.
Right.
So what happens? Where is that document?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So fire inspector walks into a building, use this building and says, can I get a copy of your fire alarm report or sprinkler report? Where is it? Right? And the person that, if they walk into that building and the person they need to talk to isn't there, now they can't even get it.
Right.
They used to be able to.
Oh, I said it to Candy in
It's
the office.
stored
you know?
in some,
know.
yeah. We centralize that information at our property management firm, and now the fire inspector has to go call somebody, follow up with somebody,
Sure.
and that takes time. And they don't have it.
Right.
So what we've changed then is before they walk into a building, they can pull it up, pull all that information up. They don't need to ask for documentation anymore because they already have it.
Yeah.
So they can do quicker inspections.
Yep.
And they can be prepared.
Right.
Right. And fire departments love to be prepared.
Right.
They don't just want to walk into something blind.
Yeah.
Right. And so having that information on a system prior to an inspection allows them to address things while they're there too.
Sure.
There could be deficiencies that are still existing that didn't get repaired. And they don't have to kind of walk around and collect the information anymore.
Well, plus, like, if you look at the old style inspection reports, and they're still out there,
Sure.
you have a document, you have to go through that inspection report, right? So you need to know, and that's not standardized, that's another.
Okay, that could be a whole
That's another thing. But now you're pinpointing, hey, I've got these 5 deficiencies,
Right.
and 4 are non-critical and 1 is critical. Well, where am I spending my time?
We're going to address this right now.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is, and this is feedback from, the biggest change has been since we started was we're getting so much more feedback from the contractors now. I hear from contractors all the time that they're so busy with work. Their biggest issue now is not uploading a report or paying a fee. It's technicians to do the work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think about that, and I remember back to where when I was on the other side of this, I don't even want to say other side, doing a different role. Really, we're all on the same side. My challenge was trying to get business.
Sure. Sure.
I was trying to figure out how I could get more
sales side.
customers.
Yeah.
And I talk to companies now where they're not doing any door knocking. They're just following up on inbound leads coming in.
Yeah.
And maybe they're just really good at marketing. But what I also know is that behind the scenes, we do so much of pushing inspection requirements and deficiency follow-up that we generate a lot of inbound for people.
Yeah.
And what most people don't maybe realize is that, yes, we get copies of reports. Sure. But that's not really what our business is. Right. Our business is to use that data to ensure that the inspections and the maintenance get done.
Yep.
Right. So if we, so we build the database for the fire department, because unfortunately, they aren't able to give it to us like we
Yeah.
thought they were.
Yeah.
So I have a full-time team of people. I have 5 full-time people that just walk the streets using Google Earth products and other, other proprietary, data
Mapping
services
thing,
and
yeah.
mapping things where we'll virtually walk a city to look for a test header on the side of a building.
Oh,
I
no
know it has a
way.
fire pump. I
Wow.
can see standpipes. I can see, sometimes you can walk into buildings and see that it has a sprinkler head on the ceiling.
Sure.
I can see the panel. Well, I can then immediately know that that building has these systems.
Sure.
And then if I don't get an inspection report in 12 months, then either I didn't get submitted to me or it's past due, right? One of these 2 things is true. And then we start to act on that
Right.
and we start to collect the data. And if I don't get another report the following year, we notify the building that it's
Sure.
past due. Not on just paper or emails. We pick up the phone and call, right? So we have a team of people that are servicing the account for the fire department.
Yeah.
They just
Yeah.
have to do it.
Right.
So let's say I send a notice to the building owner for a fire alarm that hasn't been tested. That building owner then goes, to Google or looks at who they used last time. And calls somebody and says, hey, I need to get my fire alarm inspected because I got a letter from the fire department.
Yeah.
Or they don't even say why they called. They just say, I need to get my fire alarm inspected.
Right.
Contractor
So
gets a new account, charges hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, but doesn't realize that that business was driven by our
interesting.
team.
Yeah.
So their business is increasing, their asset value is increasing, their revenue, and what they're now concerned about is, how do I fulfill this business? I
Sure.
need technicians.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm hearing is
Yeah,
I need more techs, I need more techs.
Yeah. And the wave obviously is almost since you guys started 15 years ago,
Yeah.
2009, right after the recession hit in 2008. That's when inspection, testing, and maintenance for fire protection was like, oh man, the business just crashed on the install side. So a lot of these contractors,
So how do we
keep the
do?
doors open?
Yeah.
Right. So there was a nice flood from that, and then we had the pandemic hit, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, still need fire safety in these buildings. It was an essential business almost within like 3 weeks of it being everything being shut down.
For everybody, that was scary, but our business did not.
Yeah.
I mean, small dip for a month, but then it was business as
Back to
usual.
normal. Yeah.
And I think we were just kind of lucky. We were in the right industry.
Yeah.
None of us planned for that.
No. But I always say it's a pandemic and recession resistant business because it's a codified industry and the fire safety is there.
Yeah.
The thing is, you put these these very expensive systems in,
Right.
maintaining them is a fraction of the cost.
Right.
And if you don't regulate that, then
Could be.
why put them in?
And I think the other thing that's driving it too is, and this is something is, certainly everybody understands that the contractor business is private equities come into that.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Yeah.
Significantly. So these are assets, right?
Sure.
These owners, these family businesses, these are valuable.
Yeah.
If they have recurring revenue,
Right.
right?
It's sticky too.
And so, so I think that's driving people to be, to pursue that in their business more so than maybe the installs, but that's what I've always looked at. It says, we always looked at our business from a stakeholder standpoint is there's winners all around, right? The fire department gains a tool that helps them do their job.
Yep.
Right. At a level that they could not replicate internally. Some have tried.
Right.
Right. And I have some good examples of that. So they get something that, helps them do their job and peace of mind because they're in the business of compliance and that's what they're paid to do. That's what they're sworn to do.
Sure.
The contractors, right? This generates a lot of revenue for them.
Yeah.
I mean, any repairs get done faster. More inspections get done. And some of those can be very lucrative.
Yeah.
And not just on the revenue they get at that time, but what that does to the value of their business,
Sure,
right? I mean, the multiples are good,
right.
right, on those businesses. And so every time we get an extra $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 into a city for revenue that's gonna happen, somebody's benefiting from that.
Yeah.
On an asset value.
Well, I think everybody is,
Yeah.
including the safety of the
Yeah.
the buildings. If you walk into a building, you want to make sure that that's just stuff.
In the building owners, we get requests every day from building owners, property management companies, and we have the ability to give them a view-only access of their buildings.
Sure.
So they can't, they can't change the data, they can't
Yeah.
do anything like that. So they can see, they get a snapshot of their information in their building. And softwares like yourselves also provide that to them, but they get it, they want to see that it's been submitted, they want to see the fire department has it, so they'll get us, they can look into TCE to see that. Or they have a group of buildings across the country.
Yeah, like the big real
And
estate people.
they want to see all of their buildings, and so
Yeah.
we give them a view only access, and we get more and more of those requests are coming in.
Interesting.
So there's thousands of buildings that are using TC essentially just to see that it's happening.
Sure.
See what's going on. And so, it's been a fun journey.
Do you get any requests from insurers yet? Because that's like I've always, I talked to Matt about it the other
Yeah.
day too. I was just like, hey, what is the landscape of insurance? Because that we say AHJ a lot.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks fire official or fire prevention bureau, whatever it may be. It depends on what town you're in, whatever. But the insurer has a big part of this.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of stuff there where, I've heard different things of like,
I'm surprised we don't get more.
Yeah.
To your point. We do have some of that, but so something that the data, we don't actually own the data. Right. So the fire department, we're hosting it and everything, but we don't. I can't just go give or sell.
To the insurer. Right?
But what does happen, and we have a couple of examples, is the state of Idaho has their own insurance rating bureau.
Oh, wow.
Right. So they came and says, hey, when we do ratings on buildings, fire ratings on buildings, we want to be able to see this information. So because we're gonna use that information.
Yeah.
So we says, sounds great, but you need to get permission from Boise and Meridian, all the folks that we work with.
Yep.
They did. So the rating bureau in Idaho, and Washington, can pull up information.
Interesting.
When they go to fire rate buildings.
Wow.
So it's definitely happening.
Right.
I wouldn't say that it's something significant at this point. But
Sure.
It's something that is probably foreseeable. You
Yeah.
can see the insurance companies playing a bigger role. I do think that there is a way for the insurance companies to help play a bigger role to ensure these buildings are tested.
Yeah.
So you have the fire department who's now using TCE as a tool.
Yep.
I think if you get both involved, you could
do
that.
That's a big change.
But it's not going to solve the supply side though.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And you could have as many contractors as you want or service providers.
Right.
The technicians, and it's starting, it's getting better, but it's still, there's still not enough. There's still not enough feet on the ground. And there's some technology that is I think a lot of this data, and we were kind of getting to this earlier, of like, all right, we have all this data. Well, this should drive some of the changes to the code, right? Where if we know this is happening and how frequently or infrequently these systems are being deficient, well, let's change the code a little bit. Let's be smart about it. If we don't have the people there, do we have to be there on a quarterly, or can we move it to a semi-annual? And I know NFPA has done that in the past, but I think there's such an opportunity to do that. And again, there's different stakeholders that might not want the change, or some that want the change. So it's like, who's going to organize everybody?
I think that certainly we see, so there's some states, so most of the areas we work in, as you know, there's not standardization on the forms or the data. Right. So there's deficiencies that can come in that, could be typed in, could be coming in one way. They all mean the same thing, but they're not exact. So it's not easy to quantify it.
Sure.
places like the Seattle, greater Seattle area,
Yep.
where they've gone and says, here is our forms, here's these pass-fail questions. So they're collecting this information in a standardized way. And we've done some analysis and said, here's your most common deficiencies, and they can run it against fire alarm panels and
Yeah.
size of buildings. So they're starting to do that.
Oh, that's good.
California, right? So we collect all that in a very standardized way.
Yeah.
Now, I'm certainly not a code expert. I'm not even all that. So we talked about, my brother actually was the one who held all the licenses.
Oh, yeah.
Understands the books and the codes and has the NICE certifications. And his mind is brilliant when it comes to that.
Yeah.
I was a sales guy. So I try to stay away a little bit of telling people how the code should be written,
Sure.
or always what they should do with that data.
Yeah.
Because I think there's people that should be taking that and digesting it and making determinations on frequencies and
Yeah.
things like that. Where we operate is, if that's how the code's written today, we're just applying as it is. And if the fire department or the code says it needs to be tested annually, that's what we're gonna hold the building accountable to.
Yeah.
But there's probably a conversation that could or should be had at some point.
Yeah, and it started and stopped,
Mhm.
right? And again, what in the fire protection, fire service realm, where are the biggest hurdles?
Sure.
Right? It's labor. Labor is the number one, and I don't think that's going away. How
Yes and no. I mean, I do know that companies like yourself,
Yeah.
well, you're making people more efficient. So can we get more out of our resources? But to a certain extent.
Yeah, there's to a
Um,
certain extent, you only can, and again, like you said, there's the technicians and even back office staff are, so I want to say severely, but probably just less than severe.
I'm intrigued though with the consolidation,
Sure.
in that, certainly these assets are growing and being purchased. And what happens then is you do tighten up routes,
Yeah,
because that company has a larger presence. I don't know how, if I have a technician that's driving distance is significantly decreased because we now have a larger footprint in that area from a
Yeah.
customer base, you should see that technician can get more done in the same amount of time because their driving distance is a lot less.
Yeah.
From stop to stop during the day. And if you looked at that across the whole country and enough consolidation happens, that will have an impact at some
Yeah.
level in terms of being able to get more done.
Yeah.
And if they're using, Inspect Point and the combination of all that, do I think that there's not a need to, on a national level, recruit? I mean, these jobs are lucrative now,
Yeah, they are.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
what a technician can make very early in their career far
Oh, yeah.
exceeds what most college degrees pay now,
Oh.
coming out of school.
Yeah.
For some of these jobs.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that there's a time where more people are like, nah, I'm gonna go get my hands dirty a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think their quality of life, at least from a financial standpoint, would be improved.
Sure.
And I just don't know how good of a job we are recruiting people to the industry.
Well, then at that point, and I believe there's a consolidation happening now.
Yeah.
There'll be a fragmentation at some point because there'll be these younger technicians that are like, oh, I'm the asset to this company.
Sure.
Well, why can't I just do this myself? So I think there'll be a little fragmentation, probably in another 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But because there's a gap. We're kind of in that middle generation gap where there's a lot of older companies that are retiring and selling out. But there's a few in the middle, and then there's a lot of newer ones, and we see that every day.
Yeah.
Just new, owner operated companies that, hey, they're the asset to that business a lot of times. Well, why can't I just go start this?
Sure.
So
Right. Every time a business is acquired, somebody starts.
yeah, it just
Right.
breaks off. Right?
And some succeed and some don't.
Yeah.
But sure. And you need that.
Yeah, you do.
Competition. Somebody has to go take chances
Yeah,
and
right,
take that risk.
right.
And you need some of that competition, but
How is the fire service? I didn't think about this in some of my thoughts. Like, do they have the same problems with labor? I know where you guys are solving a labor issue with your But I work with the FDNY, or had
Yeah.
quite a bit, and they had a really tough time recruiting the last 5 years or so.
It's interesting. So one of the things that we do, and this goes to the cost. So people submit us information and there's a fee for it, right? I look at it as an investment because we think there's a return on that investment. But, some cities have a revenue share where we charge above and beyond our rate, and that money goes to the fire department.
Yep.
And they use that money to hire people that are dedicated to this. So I'll use Austin, Texas as an example. Austin, Texas, the fee is it's a $30 submittal fee.
Okay.
But
Per annual per system.
yeah, correct. And half of that roughly goes to Austin, doesn't
Yeah.
go to us. And because of the number of systems they have, we're tracking upwards of 30,000 of them. So it's generating hundreds of thousands of dollars to the city.
Wow.
They use that money then, and they've hired dedicated people that help run the enforcement compliance program on just fire protection systems.
Wow.
What that's done has driven up, one, it's giving people a job.
Sure.
Right? So they're hiring people. But two is their compliance rates are through the roof compared to where they were before us.
Yeah.
So last I looked, less than 10% of the fire protection systems in the whole city of Austin have a active deficiency on it, right?
That's crazy.
Which is very, very
Yeah.
high. It's almost 90% of their fire protection systems are within test range, meaning they're not past due for testing. They've been tested
Wow.
semi-annually or annually. Now, why I bring them up is prior to the compliance engine, they tried to do this internally. They hired dedicated people. They even charged their own fee. They kind of had a submittal process through some software they built, but they only could get it up to 11% compliance.
Wow.
Now, some of that was the report just didn't get submitted. It might have been tested.
Sure.
But internally, they could not get this program going, and they tried for years.
Yeah.
And we come in with our resources that we have and our expertise. And over the past few years now, we're getting to a point that was unthinkable for them. But they also were able to fund these jobs.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Because before they weren't able to fund them because they weren't able to bring in enough revenue to fund it. So then it was a cost. Somebody was paying for it. The taxpayers were paying for it at some level.
Interesting.
But so the contractors there now, certainly there's more work.
Yep.
More inspections, more
Well,
maintenance.
exploding there too.
And on top of that, you've had significant growth.
Yeah.
Right. The number of buildings has increased. The population has increased significantly. And so that's a really, really good example of where this process has been very efficient and everybody's benefited from it.
Sure.
In that city. So basically, we're just talking about probability here. The likelihood of that one of those systems working is just higher.
Yeah.
Right. It's no guarantees.
Yep.
Doesn't mean the second after that tech leaves, that system can't fail.
Right.
Right. It just means that there's a higher probability that systems are going to work.
Right.
And that's all basically we're trying to do is increasing that to as close to 100% as possible, knowing that it's probably never going to get to 100.
Yeah.
But where we were before, in most cities, we're talking 40% compliance. If you walked around in the average city and you went to 100 fire protection systems, you're going to see that at least half of them either aren't tested or have deficiency that hasn't fixed. Whereas you're talking about, half of the market is potentially not in compliance.
Yeah, or they don't even know where
They don't know
the building, like you're identifying buildings that they don't even know about, right?
When we got into this, you used to think that buildings did this intentionally, right? That they just didn't want to pay.
Yep.
To have it inspected because there's a cost, right?
Yeah.
If you're an owner of a building or managing a building,
thousands of dollars a year for a decent sized building,
or to maintain these systems, right? And what we've learned though is, so we take in inbound calls from hundreds of properties every day. So when we send notices out or make calls, that if they have a question, our number's listed on it. So usually that inbound comes back to us for us to answer FAQ type stuff. And so we get a lot of data now from buildings saying, I didn't even know I was supposed to do it, or I wasn't aware.
Wow.
I didn't even know I had that in my building.
Wow.
Because the assumption is that they're as vested in this as we are.
Sure.
And that's just not true, right? They have so many other things. who cuts the grass, who shovels the snow,
Yeah,
who maintains the HVAC system,
sure.
the roof's leaking,
Yeah,
tenant, rental
right.
disputes. Like, so there's a lot that goes on. And to think that the property manager or the building owners are as versed in code books that are this big is just unrealistic.
yeah.
So yes, some people intentionally don't do it because they're trying to get by as cheap as possible. Right.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, a good portion of them didn't realize they were supposed to, or they thought the contractor was taking care of it.
Sure.
And the contractor failed to call them and set an appointment to do the inspection, and then it just fell to the wayside. And that happens all the time
Right.
because they're so busy,
Yeah,
or their scheduling department was using pen and paper or not an efficient software or
sure.
what have you. So I've learned over the years that it's not just intentional, that
Right.
these systems just aren't being.
It's not front of mind. It's like, hey, the air conditioning's not working. Somebody's hot in here, right?
You know,
It's
in
a pass-
Illinois, we have to get stickers on our license plates. Every year we have to pay to get a sticker to put on our license plate. I'm sure other states have this too.
Yeah.
And for years they would send you a notice. And then like they stopped doing it. And I ended up for 6 months driving around with an old license plate sticker. And my wife tells me, and I totally forgot about it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
because I didn't get reminded of it.
Right, right.
I didn't put it on my own calendar. I didn't
Yeah.
maintain the schedule.
Yeah, you need to-
And I thought about that and I thought, our notices that we send help buildings that just don't keep good schedules. And if the contractor doesn't do it for them, most of them would just
you let it go,
let
right?
it go.
Right. Yeah, it's a
Time goes
phase.
by, I
Yeah.
just had it inspected. Yeah, a year ago,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So,
I'm interested, you brought up Austin, Texas and being
Yeah.
like before, after, and like, it'd be interesting to see the data now, you probably don't have this, of like the actual fire incidents and how, and kind of deep dive, because that's
Yeah.
like the end goal.
yeah,
And they might not have that. Obviously, fires are still gonna happen, but hey, the scale of fires, because of these fire protection systems,
Right.
you're gonna have
is that left?
firefighters, they're quicker due to fire alarm systems being properly operating. Obviously, sprinkler suppression system's gonna put it out.
Right.
So it'd be interesting to see the results down the line of that, to see.
I haven't seen a fire department tackle that yet.
Yeah,
They've done some in comparison to, false alarms.
sure.
But I haven't seen,
Oh, that's interesting. See, there's some data.
there's some data on that.
Okay,
Seattle had done one, it's been a few years now, Los Angeles had
because
done
that's a
one.
cost if you're rolling a truck, right?
Yeah, I mean, so Los Angeles took, they had some problematic buildings where, I mean, sometimes they roll trucks to some of these buildings like daily, in
Yeah.
some of these cities, on some of these.
Oh,
campuses.
in New York, it was like that all the time. You got a water flow that it was like daily or every week.
Yeah, so they took these buildings and then after TCE had been implemented for a period of time,
Sure.
the theory was that if these fire alarms are now gonna get repaired, we should see less of these triggers. And in both Seattle and Austin, they were able to, Seattle and LA, they were able to see a decrease. Now, it's still, causation was that in fact the only reason why they came
Yeah,
down?
yeah,
So I think that there's probably still, you probably wanted
more data, yeah.
more data and expand it out, but at least in those two instances, that is what happened. You did see decreases over time as we started to help them get these systems more in compliance,
Sure.
right? So I think that's making an impact.
Yeah.
In terms of having more.
It's a cost to the city, cost to taxpayers. at the end of
And
it,
that was
right?
the thought is, hey, how does this save the city money? Because it's expensive,
Yeah,
to put, it's not only expensive, it's unsafe.
Yeah.
So every time they get in those trucks and have to drive somewhere, the chance of them getting into an accident is real.
there's a certain percentage.
And so you end up with injuries and deaths, sometimes just on their way to what we call a false
Yeah,
alarm, an alarm activation that shouldn't or didn't need to go off.
Right.
And so that was actually the bigger question they wanted to see is, hey, is this going to reduce our risk from a injury standpoint?
Yeah.
And sure, cost wise, they can put some numbers against it and say, hey, our truck wear and tear and people, et cetera. But I haven't seen one yet on the loss side of it, fire loss, and that might even be something the insurance companies would be more interested in.
Yeah, totally. I'm sure insurance companies are more worried about weather right now than anything, but fire is still a big piece of the policy.
Sure.
I get my personal policies. It's like, oh, do you have this system, you get a discount. I'm like, well, are they really checking, or is it maintained,
Yeah,
right?
I can tell you that my policies have gone up recently.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One, and you might, it'd be interesting to deep dive into deficiencies, because we're about to come out with a study on just what the deficiency makeup looks like. I did this briefly for fire alarm a little bit, like, hey, what are the number one deficiencies, and why are those happening?
Yeah.
And that's another question. Are like, do HJs, they probably care about all deficiencies, but all deficiencies aren't the same.
No, they're not.
Right.
So I touched on it, the places where they have standardization in their forms,
Yeah.
so whether it's coming from company A or company B,
It's
they
same.
can start to make those comparisons. And what some cities have done in those cities, so in Los Angeles, there's a standard form,
Reg 4.
Reg 4.
Yeah.
Behind those deficiencies, they've rated them.
Oh, interesting.
So, and TCE does this automatically. So there's a critical down to non-critical.
Okay.
So contractor just answers pass fail. But when it comes to LA, they've said this one's more important than this one.
Interesting.
So that, because even with our tool, they still have to decide how they use their resources.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something that's, flags this critical, they may physically go to that building versus, hey, you're gonna get this done in 30 days. That type of stuff.
Right.
So we actually have that in place on the back end. Seattle uses that. In fact, we track elevators and backflows, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the whole state of Mississippi is one example where all elevators, escalators, chairlifts come through the compliance center.
Yeah.
And they have a standard form. And they have certain deficiencies that get flagged that require a full reinspection, and those where they can just be fixed.
Oh, wow.
Right. So it's not something that the contractor submitting sees. It's
Sure.
something that the fire department is doing for their
That's
resources and
interesting.
rating them based on their response to it.
Yeah. It's kind of their call, because I know in NFPA on the if you mark something deficient, right?
Sure.
Or NFPA is a guideline, but their guidelines in the code and the appendix and all that. A lot of the deficiency statuses are moved to the appendix. They're not in the code, so they're a guideline, because there are different. It's a gray area, and a lot of times the service providers and contractors, they don't want to put them in that. So an HJ can determine that.
They can, yeah, and they're more looking at it from a response, like what are we gonna do about it?
Right.
Are we gonna shut down the building?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah.
Because
Fire alarms off or something.
yeah, because there's no water running to sprinkler system.
Yeah.
Okay. Versus, I have a single painted head. Right?
Right.
Now, again, I don't make that determination.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you, right, which one is more important than the other. But they've made that determination.
Yeah.
And they're basing it on, what are we gonna do about it? Are we gonna shut the building down? Are we gonna put them on fire watch? Or are we gonna just sit back and be okay with it getting fixed in 30 days?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't get fixed in 30 days, then we're gonna step up our follow-up.
Right.
Right? And they're making that determination essentially on their own with their own business processes. Right? There's not necessarily a perfect playbook that says down to an individual deficiency, what is the fire department's response supposed to be?
Gotcha.
Right? You must put them on fire watch. You must send them a letter. You must physically go knock on that door.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So they have made up their own follow-up to what they're gonna do. And that may be different from department to department. It may be different than what the contractor believes they should do.
Sure.
Right? And I think that over time, we're gonna start to see some of that maybe shake out a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? And I think what would help that is more data standardization and analyzing the data, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're in an interesting position where it's possible,
Yep.
actually. Right, whether or not NFPA or the associations create standardization of here are the questions getting answered, here's the forms, here's how it looks. Right, and this kind of goes along with you know, some of the data codes that have come out, right? Is I could see, because the fire departments, you know, we have some fire departments, Raleigh says, no, you need to use this form now. So we create those questions in TCE.
Yep.
And every contractor now has to use those. That's determined at the fire department. So essentially, we could, if, you know, once we have all the fire departments using TCE, essentially you could roll out more
You could,
standardization.
but then are you getting into the, I almost think you need a consortium of all your AHJs to kind of come up with one, because they're all going to think differently.
Yeah,
New York's going to think different than Chicago. It's going to think different.
I still think we're seeing it on a regional level.
Yeah.
And it's the fire departments that are wanting it.
Right.
You know, we've seen it in Seattle area, and they get together with the industry stakeholders, so they'll hold meetings, and they do a really good job of this. Maybe some of the best I've seen in the country, where they'll get together, they'll get people from the fire alarm industry and the sprinkler industry, and they'll get together and they'll hold meetings and say, what should these forms look like?
Right.
And we're going to use them though for this whole area.
Ah, that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just basically build them. We don't.
Right.
We don't actually have any
grabbing
insight
the
as to
data.
what those questions should look like.
Yep.
They basically say, here's what we want it to be.
Yep.
And we say, oh, but once that happens, the data now is
powerful, yeah.
very powerful and usable in a way that it wasn't before.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think you're going to see it just nationally play out.
No, I don't think so.
And at least not in anytime soon.
Well, and just NFPA work, the whole standards and codes process works pretty slow. And I've said this before, it's just, it from time, like I'm on NFPA 25, right? We're working on 2026 version right now. Working on it now, that's not going to get adopted for probably 8 years in most jurisdictions. So that time in between, there's a lot of stuff going on that we're finding out, whether it's from data, new technology, whatever. So it'd be nice to standardize, speed that up a little bit. And I'm not going to solve it here.
Yeah, and we're not, and our focus isn't on standard data, honestly.
Right.
Ours is right now, I mean, what our roadmap looks like is more fire departments using us, getting the data quicker to them.
Yep.
And that's really what we're spending our time on.
Sure.
Right. And on the back end, it's beefing up those services of notifying buildings when things aren't the way they should be. And that's where we've increased most of our resources, is on that administrative push. And that just is to give the fire departments that team of people that they just can't build internally.
Yeah. And that team turns into the contractors too, right?
Absolutely.
They're resolving those deficiencies
Absolutely.
out. Like almost, not I want to say instantly, but I mean, they're able to do it with the integration now. The technicians they can write it up and almost resolve it.
Yeah.
So they're documenting it and resolving it at the same time.
I think that, you know, when I look at the integration and when we've been talking about, I mean, before we actually had it, I mean, it'd been a year, 2 years, maybe longer.
I've been wanting it for 4 years.
I mean,
but you know, that's me, you know, us vision, you know, with the vision, it's just putting, you know, and I have to give a shout out to Robbie and Lee for working on that.
Sure.
And
our teams, you know, it was because there was a lot of things we didn't have answers to.
Right.
We had to build certain things and put the data in formats. So we had a lot of work to do to get it to where it was where it would work for us. Same with your team. And so neither one of us did the development. Here's what we wanted to do. You know, make it happen.
Magic wand.
Right. And so they spent a considerable amount of time and resources, and the investment we made. I mean, it still hasn't paid off. I mean, it's still in its infancy.
Right.
It's going to be, you know, we're talking months where we're going to start to see large adoption of it.
Yeah.
And I think the deficiency closure, though, part of it is going to be one of the best features, where you close it out at an inspect point, closes it out. so that we don't have false data.
Yep,
AHJs aren't chasing something that may have already been fixed.
right,
And what we're talking about is just time,
yeah,
right? Less time spent.
right, because it's a
Less-
month now, or whatever that
It-
is, it's weeks to a month of.
Yeah,
getting it.
or people are having to do duplicate work, and we're
Yeah,
just trying to say, look, that's not the goal here. I mean,
Right.
when we put our business plan together, we're talking 15 years ago, we always envisioned that TCE was this hub, central hub, kind of a glue that connected contractors to fire departments, but there are other softwares we're playing in this marketplace. We're not saying that we were going to be this full suite to the contractors and to the fire departments and to insurance companies, et cetera. But we were going to play a critical role in that process.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
in the
yeah.
exchange. And so it was always the vision that we were going to be connecting to those inspect points. And to finally see that really start to be realistic, it's been amazing.
It's exciting, yeah. It's really cool.
And so the more, as your business grows, we're going to start to see more reports coming in that way and saving time. Those resources get refocused on other things, and that benefits the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
At least that's what it's supposed to do.
Oh, that's hope, right? Yeah. Hopefully soften a little bit of a labor issue too.
Yeah. And saves cost. I mean, it cuts down some of the cost.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Bryan. This is awesome. Thanks for having me out on a cold winter day here.
Well, that's why we put this up, and we needed a warm background.
So I always end with this something called a quick response round, where I asked I think I did it with Matt as well when he was on with Andreas a couple years ago. Just quick off the top of your head, favorite Chicago food?
We love Lou Malnati's pizza.
Yeah. All right. So it's deep dish.
Yeah, I'm not only deep dish guy.
Okay.
I mean, I like thin pizzas from your neck of the woods as well. But that's still a great one. We have a great location right in Naperville by our house.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have to go with Italian beef. That's my favorite.
Okay.
Just the Chicago hot dog. It's probably between the two.
Okay.
I can't do deep dish because
doesn't sit well.
From New York, lived in New York City for a while. Now I'm in Connecticut, so you got the Connecticut pizza, and
my favorite pizza, Grimaldi's pizza, which is from New York.
It's
coal-fired. Pizza. And when I lived down in Fort Myers for close to 2 years when I started this business, we went down there. And I was searching for a pizza place down there when we lived down there to find that I would eat, and tried several and found this Grimaldi's pizza place. And
really?
And they had one down in Fort Myers, and we order it, and me and my wife eat this pizza, and it's thin, right? And so we ate it quick, and we kind of look at each other and like, that's amazing. We ordered another one. I went back and picked up a second one. We ate they don't have one up here though, but it's from New York.
It's in New York.
Yeah, it's from New York, and they have
under the
locations.
Brooklyn
I
Bridge.
think there's some up in Wisconsin.
I didn't know that.
So I'm not a deep dish only guy. I'll venture out.
It's good. It's a casserole, in my opinion, but it's a good casserole. It's just different.
It's still pizza.
Still pizza.
Yeah. You don't fold it in half the same way.
Well, it's been
cool.
Yeah, this has been great, man. Thank you. I guess for the listenership and viewership, where we know where we can find you, but you want to give a plug to?
Sure. www.thecomplianceengine.com is our website. Visit it. We've got phone numbers on there. We're ready to serve you.
Yeah.
I mean, so we look forward to our partnership. Integration and to growing compliance.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's I think the industry's has changed, seen the change. I think it's finally flipped to digital, right? I think it's predominantly digital now.
Yeah.
I hope.
There's still some
stragglers. It depends on what section of the industry you're in, but it's good stuff coming forward.
This has been episode 58 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by Inspect Point. hopefully you enjoyed the conversation with Bryan and I today. I was able to do that in person, which is really, really cool to do sometimes. Obviously, Compliance Engine and Brycer have provided a great value to the industry, and I think there's a lot moving forward. So appreciate all the listenership, and make sure to like and subscribe. Take care.